Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for coming. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all to chat. Hope everyone's staying as safe and healthy as they can these days. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do in a minute. And I'll be joined by three clients today, two of whom are here now. One's going to be joining in about a half hour. So Jamie Marvel from Wharton, and Parker Lowe also from Wharton, and then we'll be having another client join from Yale as well. So I'll give a little bit of introduction to myself. I'll sort of talk through some candidate success stories, and then I'll pass on to Jamie and Parker to talk a little bit about their experiences as well. If you have any questions, please just feel free to ask them in the comments. I think there are a couple different places where you can ask questions on YouTube, or if you're on Facebook, feel free to kind of ask there as well. And we'll see how many questions we have. Often these videos are watched delayed, so if you don't have as many questions, then that would be the reason. So a little bit about my background. I went to MIT for undergrad and studied economics and business at Sloan. Was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad. Then I worked at Deloitte in consulting for a few years, did mostly mergers and acquisitions work, and I went to Wharton for the MBA. Picked Wharton because when I was in high school, I took a couple summers of economics classes at Wharton, really liked the curriculum, and wanted to go back for the MBA. So went there, loved the experience, and went there. I studied real estate, great real estate program, studied some healthcare. I actually founded Personal MBA Coach when I was a first-year student there. Helped a couple of my good friends with their applications. They had hired other firms to help them with their processes, and ended up sort of improving the the sort of quality and level of detail a bit here. And the first two got into Harvard, and another one got into Wharton, and we just expanded from there. So now 13 years later, I run the company with my sister, who's a former Bain consultant. And we also have some M7 admissions directors on our team as well. I'm on the board of directors for the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. Happy to talk to you about the organization later. We were just talking about our board meeting before this about an applicant fair that we might be having again this year, which will be very exciting. And we do a lot of things with admissions directors. So there's a conference every year with the heads of admissions. We'll even analyze these sort of fake profiles and determine who should get accepted and rejected and why. I tend to do a lot of different talks, not just ones here, but at different events like the GMAT conference, and many different consulting firms who invite us in to go and present. So our clients get in with a 96% success rate, and we had actually over $6 million in scholarships last year. So a little bit more about what we do, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. So, what does Personal MBA Coach do? For those of you that are not familiar with us or admissions consulting in general, we help you throughout the entire life cycle of your journey. So you could be in college and watching this, or just graduating. We have what we call early MBA planning programs, which is essentially strategic guidance and advice for how you can improve yourself between now and when you apply. What extracurriculars should you do? Should you join a new organization? Should you start something? Are you in the right job? Are you doing the right things at the right job? Then we have complete GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring. We have in-house software that we use to guide through the sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, full-length exams. Our applicants that use our tutoring do extremely well in exams. GMAT on average, they're raising by a little over 90 points, and GRE have kind of similar numbers. And I mentioned some of this before, but we have former M7 interviewers and also top 10 and top 15 interviewers. A lot of people that used to interview at the schools on our team to help, and then former clients to network with at all of the sort of top schools here. Talk a little bit about some sort of success stories. Maybe I'll do one success story, and then I'll go to sort of introduce our clients here today, and then we'll bounce back for some others. So these folks are doing a lot, and often it's kind of articulating some kind of compelling story, some kind of unique story. Now, if anyone wants other advice, so not just success stories, we have a lot of other webinars and videos. So visit our website, www.personalmbacoach.com. We have videos on our homepage. Parker's on our homepage, I believe. And so you can hear other tips, advice on things to do. This is really just focused on success stories from applicants who have done it in the past. So here's candidate one. I kept things a little bit vague, given this is a public video, but GPA was below 3.5, GRE in the 330s, 4 years of experience in consulting, and this was a white female that studied at a top school. So this is sort of the person, and this is not one of our folks here today. This is somebody else. This is sort of the person that you have in mind, right? This image. Now, what were some challenges here? One, previous rejection. So this was not the first time that this person had applied. Kind of a common background, right? If we go back to consulting, common background. So how can we step out and not be just a consultant? And we can actually hear a little bit about that today from some of our folks. And then average stats, lower than 3.5 GPA. I feel like that's not so amazing. And GRE into the 330s, but it was on the lower side, let's say. So some details, right? So we actually focused a lot on art, and I keep a lot of this anonymous. So some of the details might be changed around a little bit just for privacy, but very specific focus. So here, focused on like art and art consulting, passionate about art, kind of growing up with that. So that ends up being an important theme. And then we had to figure out how to work this theme together. And so what's important as you're thinking about working themes together is to what level of detail do you actually have to go into as you're working through a theme. I was talking with a client a few days ago who really wanted to connect everything together. And in this particular instance, I said, it might not actually make the most sense. Your professional details are different from your personal details. And, he also came from an overrepresented, background. And I said, look, let's just keep these two things separate. If you love wine, I love wine and wine tasting. Maybe I'll own a vineyard one day. We'll see. That's sort of one area. And then if you're doing, a totally different line of work, like that's okay, right? But in some cases, we actually move is the wrong word. We kind of meld them together and create this one kind of interesting story. And so that's what we did here. We took the personal and the professional together, and got into booth with $150,000 in scholarships. But the one other success story, and then I'll go to my clients to kind of chat a little bit about their backgrounds. So here's someone else, 4.0 GPA, so clearly did really well. Mid 330s on the GRE, few years of experience, 3-4 years-ish of experience in working in finance. So what do we do here? Some things that were important to focus on were the actual interests. So sports and tutoring, and kind of combining those together. Now, when you think of sports, you might think, okay, so I've done sports. A lot of people have done sports. What is the difference? And for those of you just joining, a brief overview, because I saw the numbers sort of climbing up. So I went to MIT for undergrad, working for my MBA, running personal MBA coach for the last 13 years. And these are a few of the things that we have. You can go back and watch the beginning later, but that's sort of who I am, and my name is Scott. So we had some new joiners. So for this story, if you think about sports and you think about like helping other people and being passionate about people, that can manifest itself in different ways. Like one, it's just mentorship, telling people that they need to, be better, helping people to think through themselves. And then you can also have the thought process behind it. How do people think? How do people want to think? Can you help them to think a little bit better? And so we actually, kind of use those different themes together, even though it feels like it might not be super business school focused. And then we connected people to the consulting goals. And what we did was, in this case, this applicant didn't have a ton of work experience relative to some others, closer to 3 than 4. And so we focused a lot on the leadership roles, and specifically what we did as a leader at the firm and outside of the firm to try to offset some of that lower years of work experience. And this was actually our most successful client last year based on numbers alone. You guys are also equally successful, but got into all 6 schools that this applicant applied to at $550,000 in scholarships. So before we go into success story 3, thoughts, Parker, if you want to start kick it off, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and a couple-minute overview of your experience going through the process with us, and to what extent you want to talk about your own personal story as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Scott. Happy to chat a little bit about my background and experience with you guys. So talking a little bit about my background, I graduated from Caltech in 2018 with a BS in physics, and I pivoted to consulting and worked in the public sector with Deloitte and the State Department for 2 years, bringing analytics to the policy process. And this was, I think, a similar background to a lot of applicants, but also different insofar as it was consulting, but it was public sector, and it was more STEM oriented than business or econ oriented. So business school was something that really hadn't been on my radar as an undergrad, and it was something that had only now eked its way into my consciousness, a year or two after having left undergrad. So I was originally planning to apply now this current fall. So I reached out to Scott in February to start having a conversation about things I could maybe do over the summer to prepare. But as we all know, the world is a very tumultuous place. And as a result, COVID struck, and Scott got back to me and he said, you know what, you should probably just apply right now, round 3. And that, in my opinion, was probably one of the most valuable pieces of advice I could have gotten, because it ended up putting me here at Wharton, and B, Scott had this incredible ability to understand the way that the entire process was going to change and evolve. And the value of that advice to me was just immeasurable. So talking a little bit about the actual tactical things that we worked on in the application process, I would say that there were 3 key components. Number 1, he helped me to refine that unique value proposition that I mentioned before. How do I translate Caltech physics and public sector consulting at the State Department into a story that makes sense for business schools? So I can maybe go back and chat a little bit about that if some more questions come up there. But turning it into a story was very important. And, secondly, taking that story and tailoring it specifically to the different factors and facets that each school wanted, because each school has, very different priorities, and tuning that story to resonate with each school and with each, panel of admissions people that were going to be looking at it, I think was also extremely important. And last but not least, the interview prep, extremely important. And it was great to connect with a lot of other clients of Scott's, because they're all, equally highly motivated people that really, we'd really push each other to prepare as effectively as possible for the interviews, especially the Wharton group interview. And another client of Scott's who I practiced for the Wharton group interview with ended up getting accepted as well. And he and I remained good friends. So a few, I think, takeaways from this whole experience for me. Number 1, earlier is better. If I hadn't reached out to Scott in February thinking that I was going to be starting this process in the fall, I would have missed this window entirely. So the earlier you get involved with Scott, the better. You can have more time to think about your story, more time to work on your GMAT, more time to adapt your strategy based on changing global circumstances. Earlier is absolutely better. Takeaway number 2, just the advice, the feedback, and the confidence that I got from Scott were absolutely worth it, both in terms of improving my application and improving the way I felt about myself and the way I felt about my application. Because without that preparation, I don't think I would have had the confidence to perform as well and come across as strongly as I could have and should have. And finally, and I think most importantly, Scott really acts as a force multiplier. So taking what you put in, multiplying that effort in terms of what you get out. But if you go in and you expect Scott, hey, please write my applications for me, please turn me into a good interviewer and produce a good story for me, it's just not going to happen. It's really on you to do 99% of the work, and on Scott to look at your work and say, this is what you need to change in order to be as effective as you need to be. So it's certainly a big leap in terms of effort and responsibility on your end as a client, but something that was absolutely worth the effort. So with that, I'm happy to pass it off or take any questions.
Great. Well, Parker, thanks so much. Really appreciate the kind words here. So we do have one question here. So from Mohammed. And I'll show this here. How do you combine your Caltech experience with work experience and made a cohesive story for business school? Yeah. So I guess maybe you can just talk for another 30, 60 seconds kind of about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually hoping someone was going to ask about this because it was a really fun exercise to do. I knew that the Caltech background was something that was going to be unique for business schools because I think there are actually 3 other people at Wharton currently from Caltech, which is a lot more than I thought there were going to be. But tuning that in a way that made sense to admissions officers was key. And I think the way I was able to achieve this was combining it with my work experience to tell a story about why I needed an MBA in order to make the most of that background. And the angle I ended up pursuing was talking about my goal of becoming a chief data officer. If any of you guys are familiar with the role of a chief data officer, it's essentially a new sort of emerging C-suite position where you have an executive, at a high level who's in charge of like data and analytics for the organization. As organizations become more data driven, it becomes more important to have these types of people in these types of positions, rather than the sort of geriatric executive stereotype that I think a lot of us think of. And this was something that was a perfect fit for my background because, it was clear that Caltech physics gives you a good grasp of STEM concepts and analytics. It was clear that the work I did implementing analytics at the State Department and working with their chief data officer exposed me to that role, made me interested and excited about it, and revealed to me the importance of that role and the effect that I could have in that role. And, it made telling that story very natural and very effective and very well suited for an MBA and for the value that I would get out of the MBA, because I think a lot of the importance of the story is telling them why they need to accept you and why you need the education that they provide. And I think it would have been a lot weaker if I said, yeah, I'd like to go into private equity just like everyone else. Check, please. That might have had some element of truth in it, but I don't think it would have been nearly as effective. So just finding those elements in your background that resonate with you and resonate, presumably with the admissions office, I think will dramatically enhance your chances of, success moving down the line.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. And on goals, I know we're not talking about goals today, but also for all the watchers here, you can ask any questions that you want on anything. We talk about a lot of different things in other webinars. Goals are super important, and you don't need to be aggressive in the goals. As Parker said, yes, you can write about venture capital or private equity if you want to, but guess what? It's probably not going to help you to get accepted. And so we often find that tough balance between writing something that's going to feel really, really good for you, and then also going to get you accepted. So we'll go to the next success story, and then we'll come to Jamie afterwards. So here's another applicant, an Indian female, internationally from outside the U.S. 730 GMAT, 3 years of work experience and working in trading, sales and trading type of a role. So what was a challenge? Well, scholarships, right? So scholarships were important. At least getting some sort of money, not necessarily the most money, because we wanted a high school, but at least some sort of money. With kind of average test scores, lighter extracurriculars and limited experience, and just 3 years. If anyone wants to talk about really not having much, really not having much experience at all, you can ask something to Parker, who had even lower. But still, 3 is kind of a little bit on the lighter side. So extracurriculars, so we were a STEM major, a lot of focus on healthcare. So here's a picture of, some kind of volunteering in a hospital. The goals are healthcare consulting. And we had some experiences with like gaps in the healthcare system. So in this case, we did tie together the personal experiences with the professional story, which I'm using some examples of of times when people did that. Not that you have to do that every time, but it makes for a more interesting story to tell. So if you have questions on how to do this, if your stories don't align, let me know. I can tell you about mine, which my personal and professional stories had nothing to do with each other. So what else do we do? We talked about the future career and like passionate about the future career with the thought around the career switch. So why are we switching from like sales and trading to a non-sales and trading kind of role. And then we also focused on the willingness to lead here despite being underrepresented. So what we meant by this is, here is somebody who, let's say, was not part of the most common group of traders as far as what she looked like or where she was from, but still had a leadership role, and talked about how she developed that leadership in an environment that didn't really have a lot of people in support above her. And so what was the final result? We got into Chicago booth in Michigan with over 160,000 and combined scholarships here. And a couple things to note before we go on to Jamie is, this is a challenging year, right? And so for those of you who are applying now and thinking of submitting in round 2, first of all, it's not too late. So Parker's to start early, which is absolutely the right advice. It is. But if you're listening to this today and you're applying in round 2, you can't start early, but it's not too late. And Jamie can talk a little bit about her timeline maybe. It's definitely not too late. We can still help you. But just kind of know, it's a little bit brighter there. Just be realistic about the expectations, right? It is a challenging year. Application numbers are up. More people are applying, and the numbers are raising faster than schools are adding any seats, even for those schools that are adding seats. So just kind of keep that in mind. So Jamie, maybe I'll let you talk for like a couple minutes or so. Nothing too crazy about your background, and as much detail as you want to give us about your experiences, and then we'll go back to some questions, and we'll go back to other success stories.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. So my name is Jamie. I am a first year at Wharton as well. A little bit about my background. So went to Notre Dame for undergrad, majored in economics and accounting. From there, much like many of the people you'll hear on these calls, I went into consulting. I was at McKinsey for 2 years, doing mostly work in the healthcare space. I did a lot of growth strategy work, org redesign, things like that for major healthcare providers. From there, I decided to take an externship at SoftBank for a year, where I worked on the human capital team, working with portfolio companies on a variety of talent-related issues, operational issues, things like that. From there, I came to Scott in mid-December of last year, and in kind of a full panic, saying I wanted to apply in round 2. How could he help me with about 2-3 weeks left before deadlines? Wouldn't necessarily recommend that timeline, but as Scott mentioned, if you're sitting on this call right now and you haven't started yet, it still is possible. So yeah, reached out to Scott mid-December with the intent of still applying to 5 schools by round 2. And so in that, worked with Scott for kind of on an accelerated timeline over 3 weeks to really get those applications ready to go by, those early January deadlines. And I would say kind of 3 main things emerged for me in terms of the value that Scott and his team really add. First off, and I think, this is something that you would likely see if you started the process as late as I did. I think there's a component of just really alleviating some of the stress around the process. When I was looking at this mound of applications that I had in the middle of December, I didn't even know where to start. I had written, half an essay here, half an essay there, but there was really no organized approach to how I was taking on this process. And so I think it's very tactical, and it might seem simple, but just setting you up on a process where you can tackle these applications in a very organized way and really make sure that, you know, the applications for each of your schools can be viewed in a holistic manner and really, you know, tell a consistent story throughout. So I would say that's point one, and you know, it may seem small, but for me it was a huge value add. I would say the second thing, in terms of goals, you know, a lot of these schools will ask you, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And I had a pretty good idea about short-term goals. I intend to go back to consulting following. And while I had a sense of my long-term goals, I didn't really understand, you know, the level of specificity that is important to a lot of these applications. And so Scott really helped me uncover, you know, okay, here's what your long-term goal is, but what does that really mean in practice? How are you going to add value to these companies? What do you specifically see yourself doing in the role you've specified? And that was something that, you know, I had really never thought of. You know, it's something 3-4 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line from now, and I hadn't taken the time to really dig into what my long-term goals meant in practice. And then I think the last thing, and Parker touched on this a little bit, you know, I didn't have too many extracurriculars, and when sitting down to write my applications initially, I didn't really see a common theme that was kind of emerging throughout my application. And so Scott really helped me to uncover, you know, what are some of the things that tie together my past experiences, both personal and professional, that I can lean on in these applications. And so for me, it ended up being a lot around teamwork and collaboration as a former collegiate athlete. And you know, these were things that I didn't really necessarily see in my own experiences, but they were themes that Scott pointed out to me, and that we were really able to kind of weave through the whole application. So those are kind of my main 3 points that I would touch on. Happy to chat about, you know, getting involved in the process late, developing your short and long-term goals, anything like that, happy to chat about. But yeah, at Wharton now, first year, was also admitted to Booth as well.
Great. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. So we'll go to success story 4. Okay, and now Narina's now here as well. So we'll bring Narina into the stream here. Hi, Narina. Thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
Actually, if you click on the little 3 ellipses, sorry if this is too casual for folks, I'm a casual guy. Click on the little 3 ellipses next to your name and click edit name, and just type your school afterwards.
Oh, okay.
That would be great for folks. So we're in success story 4, which is not Narina. So we'll go over another one, and then we'll get to you afterwards, and then we'll go back to some Q&A as well. So success story 4. This was a guy. I'll say CETOS, because CETOS wouldn't mind. So it was a 3.4 GPA, 750 GMAT, automotive, you know, experience, a very sort of specific background. You know, wanted to go, or went to a top 30 undergrad school rather. You know, wanted to go to a really top MBA. We met a while ago, actually. We met at one of the MBA fairs. I do a lot of talks at different fairs. We met at one in Boston, and you know, we did an early planning package. So I helped him specifically with what organizations to get involved in, what to do here and there, and we actually, you know, did a lot to change his whole sort of approach there. And you know, some challenges were, you know, differentiating, you know, kind of male engineer with an average GPA. Now, some details, we focused a lot on self-driving cars. So we worked in a self-driving car company, you know, debates, some volunteer sort of community work. And, you know, the goals were project management and the mobility industry. So also super specific. At one point, we actually got too narrow for the goals, and I said, hold on, let's let's dial this back a bit. I don't want you to write about 3 jobs that you can have post MBA. And so, we might have to actually expand the horizon, let's say. And, otherwise, we were really just passionate about like cars and transportation. So this was an example where, some people are generalists and they don't know what they're going to write about. And so we have to figure out what are we covering. And some people are like super narrow. So this was a case where my only hesitation going into this was like, are we too narrow, right? Because every extracurricular, so many of the things are focused on cars that I thought, actually, I wonder if this is going to be a little bit too narrow. And so we just tried to beef up everything that we could within the roles that we had. And, at the end of the day, we, like I said, like doubled down on the unique goals. So we didn't try to say, well, I also, I love this, horseback riding, and I helped my uncle at his racetrack or something. We just kind of focused on what we were actually good at. And I think by being really genuine and authentic, it worked out. And this person, also got into Wharton and Kellogg. So that's an example there. He actually might have been here to chat, but wasn't able to join. So that's success story 4. And now, Narina, maybe I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can talk through your sort of background here a bit. And I'll just kind of click through the slides. So just say next slide, and I'll just go.
I will let you know. Perfect. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So first of all, I wanted to start by thanking Scott for the opportunity of being here. I'm very happy that I'll get the chance to share my story with you. My name is Narina Daly, and I'm a second-year MBA candidate at Yale School of Management. And before going over my goals and kind of why I decided to go back to school and get an MBA, I thought it would be helpful to share with you my profile. So as you can see, I'm a CPA with 9 years of experience in the financial services. So think of asset management, private equity, real estate. Right before Yale, I was an audit manager at PwC. I was promoted 3 times throughout my careers. I was a top performer 3 out of 3 years when I had manager responsibility. My GMAT was 660. I graduated from University of Maryland at College Park. I was an accounting major. My GPA was 4.0. I was on the dean's list 8 out of 8 semesters while in undergrad. While in undergrad, I was the finance director of Accounting and Business Association. My job was to connect CPA firm with the students on campus. I had 10 plus scholarships that cover 100% of my undergrad tuition. I am Romanian by nationality, born and raised there. I'm fluent in 3 languages, Spanish, Romanian, and English. And as extracurricular activity that I had, I was a VP of Public Relations for Toastmasters. Next slide. Okay. So in my last year at PwC, I had the opportunity to coordinate and promote the implementation of robotic process automation and artificial intelligence on several engagements. And that's how I became passionate about this idea of strategizing the use of cutting-edge technologies to make business processes more effective and efficient. And this prompted me to pursue an MBA with the intention to further explore this intersection between business and technology and build on that strategic mindset that I developed at PwC, basically take the problem solving from accounting and finance to operations in all areas of a business. Next slide. My end goal was to become a chief business officer, eventually a CEO, and my vision was to find ways of integrating the cutting-edge technologies to improve business processes and ultimately the lives of people and communities in which they live. Next slide. So my MBA journey started in May 2018 when I met Scott. And after a very long decision-making process that took me months, I landed on the 8 MBA programs. I applied in round 2. I got into 5 MBA programs. I got a full scholarship and a 20K stipend from one of the MBA programs, a full scholarship from another one, and then an 80% tuition coverage from another MBA program. Next slide. And here is where my MBA journey ended, or better said, begin. This is Evans Hall, which is the building where Yale School of Management is located. As I said, I'm currently a second year, and I can say that I enjoyed every single moment of my MBA experience. And I couldn't have hoped for a better outcome. And needless to say that I'm grateful to Scott for all the help and support through this process. Thank you. And then the next slide is just another image with the school.
Very, very cool design. You're already marketing for yeah.
Yeah, and then the next one, if you go to the next one, that's another one, and that's the.
Oh, I think I removed the last.
Oh, you did that one.
But yes, very cool. We'll have to add it in later. Awesome. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, about Yale School of Management, or any questions for Narina, please feel free to ask, and we'll actually we see we'll go through the last part of the presentation, then we'll go to some Q&A. And then I might just give some other sort of general advice for those of you still listening and watching. So, our clients get into all the top schools, right? We had room for some of the logos here, but any school that you're applying to, we have people that we're sending to, and we do have really, really high success rates. And so, what else about what we do? We start, for those of you that weren't here at the beginning of the presentation, we start with early planning. If you're not applying yet, like one of our client examples, and you want to figure out how to perfect your profile between now and when you do apply, we can help you to do that. What things should you do? What things should you not do? Are you in the right job? Do you need to get another job? You can work directly with myself, and we have our former Wharton admissions director who does a lot of early planning work. Just say, look, if I'm looking at you and thousands of others, here's what I want to see. Wharton and UCLA. Then we have tutoring. So GMAT, GRE tutoring. We talked a little bit about that earlier with in-house software we use to guide through the process of modules and thousands of questions. And our folks do extremely well. So we're often the second, third, fourth, even fifth tutoring company that people come to, and pretty much always the last. We have brainstorming sessions where we'll help you to, and this is just a very high level overview. If you want to learn more, drop me an email, or better yet, visit the website and submit your information. Check out our packages, and you can go into much more details about how we work. But brainstorming session where we're learning about you and talking about your goals and your passions. We figure out what your story is, select the right schools based on personality, fit, career, chances of getting in. We'll do deep editing of the resume and the essays, and that's as much as you need. And we go through a whole project management tool, again, high level overview. And we have recommendation assistants, so help you to select the recommenders and decide who you want to ask to write them, but also what they should be writing about, and then interviews. So we have a lot of former interviewers on our team. Folks used to interview at many top schools, and so you always have a couple people that you're working with, your main consultant, and then another main editor. So we have folks top MBA students, graduate professor of English, sort of like Princeton kind of masters in English and folks like that. And so that's the model that gets you the best results at the end. And so if you want to know anything more, this is a cool downloadable. I feel like we have a few of these on our website, personalmbacoach.com/start sign up, and that can give you some information. So I'm going to go back to this slide as we go to some Q&A, just to leave something on the screen. Yeah. So here. So back to some Q&A. We have, okay, so Mohammed, thanks again for another question. Isn't strong application essays directly translate to scholarship money as long as there's no separate essay? Are there any other variables? Yeah, so I'll rephrase that question. Do you need to write anything else to get scholarships? For most of the schools, the answer is no. So you don't need to write anything. You just write the essays and submit great essays, and then you get money. There are some opportunities to write more, but they're not huge. And then also, there's been a lot of talk on scholarships, but truthfully, that's important for some people. It's not important for others. And then certain schools are going to give more money than others, right? Certain schools don't need to give money, so they don't. If you want to go to Harvard and get merit-based money, good luck. It's not going to happen. They don't do that, right? So depending on what's important to you, that would obviously sort of drive what your overall decision would be. Other variables, I would say the test score. Test score is important. Now, in Narina's case, we had a 660. We got a lot of scholarships. So clearly, it's not directly correlated in every instance, but it is correlated. And so I think if you are doing really well on an exam, or you have a good GPA, right? They want to see that you're going to be additive to the school. So they're essentially buying your seat away from someone else. So what are you going to be doing that's kind of better? And it could just be community. I mean, it could just be, look, this person has shown more interest than we've seen anybody show. I feel like they would definitely be a huge leader. Their essays are amazing, and for that reason, scholarships could potentially come. For short-term and long-term goals, do AdComs expect us to put a rough timeline? I don't think that's necessary. And maybe Jamie, I'll let you talk a little bit about goals and whether you talked about timing. But I mean, usually like what we say to our clients is we say short term is right after school and long term is like 7 to 10 years out. You don't have to write in your essay, in 8 years I will do X. You can kind of just say in the longer term. But I don't know. I'm curious, Jamie and Narina, from your experiences. I mean, was that something that was important to you?
I don't remember saying exactly the years I'm gonna be, like when I said short term, what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into strategy, some sort of consulting role, and learn what it is to be able to work with these cutting edge technologies across multiple projects and the like, and then eventually get into the industry and become the CBO and the CEO of the company, because you can't do that right after school. So as long as they see that you have a plan, I don't think you have to be 5 years in consulting or 10 years. Like, that doesn't matter. They just want you to see that you have a clear idea where you want to go.
I can comment on this a little bit too. So same thing for me. I did not specify a number of years for my short and long-term goals. The one thing I will say, as someone with only 3 years of work experience prior to applying, I wanted to make sure that even though my long-term goals were a little bit further down the line, that the role still seemed achievable. So I think when you're looking at your long-term goals, it's not so far down the line that you can't really rationalize the progression to that.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's interesting to see the different spectrums. I mean, we had Parker was on here earlier, matriculated with 2 years of experience, and Narina, you started and you had, I think it was 9 years, right?
9 years.
Yeah. So there's a wide range. And at some point I'll say things like, I don't know that a full-time MBA is right for you. And if I say that on a call, I'm just being upfront. So I might say that. But so we have just here today from 2 to 9 years. So there definitely is the range. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Narina. You can. If not, we'll go on to the next question. So let's see, Narina, what's the best part about being at Yale? And would you mind saying how old you were? You never ask a woman their age. That's one thing. But also, well, one thing, and then I'll let Narina answer that. So honestly, age is not a factor. Legally, it cannot be a factor. And so years of work experience is, and obviously that is a proxy for age. If you have 14 years of work experience, you're clearly too old, right? But they don't evaluate age. They do evaluate years of work experience. And that's one, to not discriminate against age, which is not legal in the US, but also because, you might have been, studying in a PhD program for 6 years first, right? So that's not going to count as like 6 years of work experience necessarily.
Yeah. Well, I can say that I'm in my 30s, and you shouldn't feel like you'll be discriminated or anything like that. As you can see, I actually have quite a few colleagues that have 7+ years of experience. Actually, some schools are looking for this type of experience because they know that the other students in the class are going to be able to learn from your experience, and then it just enriches the discussions that are happening in the class. So please do not be discouraged if you are, for some reason, in your 30s and you're thinking to get an MBA right now. If it does make sense for you, if you're passionate, if you believe and it will help you, with your future goal, just go for it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a program for everybody at every age, even if it seems like you are too experienced to go for a full-time, there are 1-year programs that tend to attract folks that are a little bit more experienced. You have, 1.5-year programs, you have executive programs, you have part-time programs. So there's so many different ways that you could potentially get a degree. And a lot of people are, I mean, we face a lot of questions around like part-time and executive, especially nowadays. People are in startups, and if you're lucky enough to keep your job these days, maybe there's equity and options and things. And so I had a conversation with someone recently. They said like, I'll go to full-time if I get into like X, Y, Z, otherwise I'm not giving up all my options and I'll just kind of go part-time. So sometimes that's a question that people have as well.
Yeah, I can add on that a little bit. So like in my case, I went for a full-time because I wanted to change not just function, but also industry in a way. So because of that, when you're trying to make a dramatic shift like that, a full-time is sometimes, better than a part-time and the like. At least that's what I experienced.
Exactly. So this is actually a good question. So do we have any program that skips the GMAT score as an essential part of the application? So more and more schools actually are deciding to either waive the score or go test optional. And I was asked about this for an article recently, and we'll see if my opinion becomes the reality. But how many schools will decide to waive as we get into the last weeks of the cycle? So far, at least I'll just talk about the top 10 schools for now, because it gets it's a longer conversation. We talk about every school, but there are many other schools that are also going test optional. In some schools, it's depending on part-time and full-time. In USC, you can go to their part-time test optional. But in any case, at least of the top 10 schools, MIT Sloan is test optional. Michigan Ross just came out recently that they are allowing people to apply for a waiver. And then University of Virginia Darden has a bit of a sort of hybrid where you can apply if you certain sort of characteristics. You can apply without a score, or you can submit other scores from other exams that you've taken. So there is definitely some sort of traction behind that, but we're not expecting every school to jump in the mix and Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton and everyone to just say, oh, now we don't need the exams anymore. But we'll see. It depends on COVID rates and test centers and availabilities and challenges with online. So there's definitely some flexibility this year, which is not something that we've ever said before. So good question. I'll put this up. No worries, no offense taken, I'm sure. So let's see, here's another one. So 10 years of entrepreneurship experience. It's counted as over experience for full-time MBA given GMAT score 760. So this is where like I would need to look at your profile further, to be honest with you. And I would go over this, with my team. I'd talk to our admissions director, because I would say it depends. And even when Narina first reached out, I probably hesitated a bit. I'm thinking it was a few years ago. I probably hesitated a bit about the years and said, well, that was likely somewhat of my initial conversation. So once you're at 10 years plus, 10 years is often the time when we say, let's think about executive, but not always. We definitely send people more than 10 years of experience to full-time programs every year. But this is one where I would want to look at the profile further before evaluating. And here's from Pooja. I'm an actuary working for Anne as a consultant. I just talked with one of your colleagues this week, actually. Field is not very popular. Does that affect my chances? So we have actuaries every year that we work with. I don't think it affects your chances. In some ways, coming from a different background, helps you. And so it's interesting. We have Jamie and Narina here, and I would say Jamie comes from a background that's probably more popular and Narina less popular, and they're both successful, right? So I don't know that it really makes a difference. In some ways, you might be able to actually squeeze in because they're like, oh, we don't have someone that's done X, and so I wouldn't quite call this non-traditional, but as people get more non-traditional, they in some ways become a little bit more attractive as an applicant. Schools will take middle school Spanish teachers, and that is nothing business related, but they just have something different to offer. Also, leaving a pay scale of 130 to 140K, joining an MBA is scary. Will a top school really push me further in career and pay? So I'll give my quick advice, and then I'd love to hear if either of you panelists would love to add anything here. But so my advice is, The MBA is a long-term investment, and you're not looking at instant payoff. If you're making 140,000, you certainly could make more money right away after school, but you might or might not. However, if you think about this in the scheme of your life, so many people have MBAs. I mean, we're talking about, all the people that hire consultants to get into the best program, to get the best degree. But if you're just talking about getting the MBA at all, at some point you will be up for a job against somebody else who has a degree, and you might not get that job. So, that's where it's going to pay off. I don't know if anybody has anything else that they want to add, as you're a little bit closer to like your own personal decisions about, just getting the MBA to begin with.
I can comment on that a little bit. So I was exactly at that pay scale as well. And honestly, when you're trying to think through all the taxes that you pay and everything, it's not 130 that you get on hand. Maybe so deduct 35% and all that. And then you're going to get an internship over the summer. Hopefully you'll get, make 30,000 or so. I worked all the way until August. So in that year, in my first year, I actually made over 100,000 because my company was kind enough and paid me the bonus right before I left. So I actually don't think I missed too much. And then, 9 months later, you go into an internship and you make some money. And then 9 months later, and then you start in May and you can just make 100,000. Like, think about it. It's not that much, that you are actually losing. I didn't want to think about it like that. But then, yes, of course, you need to, if you don't get a scholarship, you're going to have to finance this one way or another. And hopefully you find a company that will pay for your second year, and that will be great. But yeah, just I prefer to look at it that way. It made me feel better. So that's kind of how I got over the hump.
So I've never heard anybody talk about it like that, but that's a great way to explain it, because you're right. If you look at, the first half of the year and the second half of the year, then there's only 1 year where it's a little bit lighter. So that's good. You're a good salesperson for business schools in general.
Thank you.
I can comment briefly here too. Obviously, the pay that you can expect after graduation is important, but I think one other important thing that I found and that I didn't quite appreciate going in is the number of doors that a lot of these business schools do open for you. I think just in my first 3 months of business school, I've been blown away by the number of alums, the number of opportunities that you have from a career perspective, both during the school year, internships following, things like that. And so I think there are certain jobs that become attainable while you're in business school that maybe wouldn't have been otherwise.
100%.
Absolutely. Great point. So we have a few more minutes. We have a few more questions. So if anyone wants to keep asking questions, please feel free. The network is just very important. I mean, you could buy a book and probably learn a lot of this stuff. Probably shouldn't say that, but the network is important. Learning from friends and classmates is important, but also what you leave. So here's a question I'll answer. I don't usually do a lot of profile questions on these, but why not? So CGPA 4, GMAT 680, 7 years in software development. What are your chances to get into a top 50 school? So from what I see here, I would say pretty good. That looks pretty good at that range, and we could probably narrow down that range. I think if you look at 50, by the time you get to number 50, that's a lot of schools. So I think we could probably narrow this down. And certainly if you want some help, reach out, and happy to kind of chat. There's a question on pricing. So all of our pricing is online on our website. Just go to www.personalmbacoach.com. And it's kind of in line with industry. So usually folks, if you're doing 5 to 7 schools, you're looking at starting at around $12,000. We do have some like one-time gut checks if you just want one sort of lighter edit. But yeah, I think we could definitely help you out. I would want to look at the resume further, but would certainly want to help you out. Now, if that was an extra zero and you said top 5 school, then I think we might want to focus on the test score a little bit there. But if it's, top 50 or even honestly an hour or less, I think that we could probably make that work. So here's a good question, and Mohammed, thanks for all the questions here. And so we see a lot of people just joined recently. So if you just joined, go back to the beginning on YouTube once this is done. Watch the whole video, because we had a fantastic event, and we had some folks really talk about their experiences. So for those new joiners, once we're done, go back to the beginning and watch it, and feel free to reach out with any questions. Scott@personalmbacoach.com. So if colleges are going test optional, I'm assuming this means test optional, does it mean someone with a little bit lower than average GMAT GRE score will have some leverage? I don't think so. I don't think so. But that doesn't mean that you won't get in. Like, you could have gotten in with a lower score, whether they went test optional or not. They're just evaluating everything holistically. And, let's put it this way. If your score is low, you want to think about what you're presenting to the school. And if the school gives you an option to present a score or not to present a score, in some cases, it might make sense not to present a score. So it's a very sort of case-by-case type of decision that we take here. But I will tell you that the vast majority of applicants will be submitting test scores this year for every school. And even those schools are going test optional, especially those like Michigan that just came out with it. Most people, they're already down the path of taking an exam. So, it's not like half the people are going to submit without a score. So if you have a good score, that always helps. But if you just aren't able to get a test, it's not offered in your area, you've used your online attempts and your dog was barking and the electricity cut out and the proctor didn't come for an hour and a half and you were really frustrated about that, it's okay, you can apply anyway. And if you did really well in all of your other areas, then I think it can work out. But the caution I would give is, if you're like on the border and you feel like, you didn't quite, like academics weren't so great, and like, this is not an open invitation for weaker applicants to be applying. And, as a consulting firm, like, we carefully select our clients, and like, we're turning away more people this year than we have in previous years for a number of reasons. But, one of them is some people seeing, oh, it's test optional at MIT, so like, I'll apply with my 2.9 GPA and try to get in. Like, that's just very unlikely to work out. So, take the test optional with a grain of salt here. And I think we'll have like a couple more minutes for questions, then we'll close out. Let's see. So which ones can we pick? Because we can only pick a few of them. So how much do companies pay two-year MBA students as compared to 1 year? Are two-year students always going to get benefit with respect to annual pay after completing the MBA? So students, please jump in and disagree if you do want to disagree. But I don't think there's any difference. I don't think there's any difference. You have an MBA, you're applying for a job. If you're applying at X firm, they're paying whatever they're paying you. You can always negotiate. But it's not like 1 year students make less money than 2 year students. I don't think there's any difference at all. And let's see. So too late. So Karan, I do not think it's too late. I think that I think that, yeah, it's definitely not too late, because you're applying for 2022. Yeah, I don't think so. So I think you should reach out, and we can certainly talk about some early MBA planning stuff that we can get started. At different various schools, I mean, do they give more preference to 2 year students? More preference. Oh, preference as far as like recruiting opportunities. So, this you really have to look at it on a school by school basis, but I don't believe that's the case. I think that if you're in a school and I shouldn't say I don't believe. I know that's not the case. The opportunities are open. Sometimes part-time students do not have the same opportunities as full-time students do, so there is a little bit of a difference there. But for 1 year and 2 year, I don't think there is. And pay after graduate. So last question here. That way we can tackle all of them. It doesn't matter what school you go to. Well, it depends how you want to answer that. But as regard to pay after school, there are some companies. I almost hate to admit this, but there are some companies that might pay a little bit more to certain people than others, and the school that they graduated from could be a factor there. I wish I didn't say that, but I would be lying if I didn't say that. So the school could impact the salary offered, but it's usually not major. It's usually not that major. And so if you go to like any decent school, you're probably going to enter in at the same level. I did an internship at JP Morgan when I was at Wharton, and we had students from Wharton, of course. We had students from Columbia. We had I think it might have even been Harvard. It was definitely NYU. It was Baruch. A whole range. And the woman from Baruch did well, got a full-time offer. So at some point you're put into a pool again with everybody. So Jamie and Narina, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to see you both. I'm glad that you're all doing well and staying safe. And if anybody has any other questions, www.personalmbacoach.com. Feel free to jump on board. Stay safe, everybody. And if you have any closing words, happy to hear it as well.
I was going to say, if anyone wants to hear more about Yale program or my experience that I went through, just feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a message, and then we can talk. My name, you can find me, Narina Daly.
Same here as well. Happy to chat more about my experience, Wharton in general, anything like that. Great.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, GMAT Club. Great to be here as always. And stay well. Enjoy the upcoming weekend. Bye-bye. Best of luck.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.